actor of great renown. He's a brilliant director. He also has a black belt in Taekwondo, so I'm going to be slightly careful with saying. And also, he has 31,000 followers on Twitter, so that's not bad going. So, Adrian, let's get straight to it. You were born in Birmingham, and you used to be a boy treble with St Chad's Choir, and then you used to race across town, and you used to turn up at Mac with Ghetto Blaster in hand, and go straight into the rooms and practice your dancing. So, how was it for you?
It's weird, because as I think about it now, I see somebody who straddled two worlds, if you like, from the point of view, you think of a choir where you sing in Latin and you wear ruffs and a cassock and maybe a surplice, which is the white bit. And I became a chorister as well, so I had a little medal just before my voice broke. And throw all that off, get a baseball cap on, jump on a skateboard, and come down here and listen to Run DMC and Mantronics, who were brilliant, but not celebrated enough. I didn't really think about it then. I was just doing what I loved. And at school, I think in the audience is someone who used to go to my school. I think Emrys is in the audience. Hello! So if we don't get the mics worked out, I'll just take it off, because this is a theatre and I can project. So rather than get people uncomfortable with the sound they're hearing, just let me know.
It's deaf that we have a problem.
I'll take it off, yeah. Hi Emrys. But our school wasn't a good place for the arts. We didn't do singing, we didn't do dance, I didn't ever read a play in a classroom, a Shakespeare play or anything like that. I don't think you did either. We never did that. So everything that I wanted to do that had anything to do with the little talent I was showing at that time had to be done out of school, to the consternation of my mom, because I never did any homework. And she's here tonight, I'm confessing that. And so I would come here, and in this place, I did my first martial arts class. I did my first dance class. I sang here as well when I wasn't singing at the choir. I joined the Children's Opera Company here. They knew me so well here that I could come along without any money, without booking a time. I would look down the timetable of what was going on in all the rooms, and if one of the rooms was free, I was a sneaky microphone man. I was then allowed to use the room, and I would practice helicopters and backspins and head spins and coffee grinders, and these are all breakdancing terms and all moves. But if you watch some movie, you'll see them. And we used to practice them over and over and over again, and that attention to detail meant that we had to get it right, because you'd go to a club, the Powerhouse, and remember the Powerhouse? Yeah, the Chico Powerhouse. That place used to, on a Monday night, used to allow kids up until the age of 17. So you had to be between 13 and 17. If you paid 50 pence, you could go to the Powerhouse at 5:30 on a Monday night, and the doors would shut and everybody kicked out at 10:30. And in that club, there were massive groups of teenagers, and you had people who were in the Wham lot. You had people who were the New Romantics, big T-shirts saying "Say Yes." We used to just walk to them and say yes. Then you had the Human League guys who danced like that because they had a haircut. Then you had all sorts, and then you had the breakdancers in another group, and all of these kids from all different parts of the city would all mingle together, and the DJs would play one track, and the floor would fill with one group of kids who were into one certain style of dance and movement and dress. They changed the record, another group would take the floor, and when they changed and played hip-hop or Mantronics, as I said, or Run DMC, suddenly the floor would be filled with all of us in our trainers and our gloves, white gloves, and those glasses, the white glasses with the black line across. Some people are nodding like, yeah, I used to, I don't know pictures, but I used to wear that. And we'd be there doing the robot and body popping and breakdancing and so on. And so when I was younger, what Birmingham did for me was it absolutely injected confidence into my bloodstream. It said, yes you can, yes you will, here's the space to do it. And all I had to work out was, if I want to carry on doing this and getting paid for it, then I had to work out how to do that. But as for doing it in this city, it was easy.
And what was your parents' response to, this is the route I want to take? Maybe we should just go straight
No,
to
don't ask Mom. She'll say the truth.
When people move into the arts, the parents' response is to sort of, is this a great move, or actually we really wished you were following a more secure route?
My mom, my dad had left by then. My mom, her response was a very practical and logical one. And it was basically, A, can you do it? B, are you getting results from doing it? And so she listened to my peers, and she listened to the director of the youth theatre here. There were some reviews in papers that came out as well. She knew I loved it. I was, stuffing food down my throat and then jumping on that old skateboard and coming down here every hour that got sent. And in the summer holidays, forget it, I was gone. I was just off doing my thing. As soon as I began getting paid for what I liked doing when I was a teenager, doing walk-on work for Central TV, or working at Pebble Mill doing a radio play, and Mum would come and see me and stuff. And her attitude was, if you like it and you're willing to work hard, then she was absolutely 100% behind me. And I remember my grant, we used to get grants then from Birmingham when I went to drama school, and my grant was late, so for 9 or 10 weeks I didn't have any money to live on in London, but I was training at RADA. And I remember Mum, single parent family, 3 children, and my mum financing that whole period, just working out a way to make sure that I had the money, and I've never forgotten that.
How did you find out about RADA? I mean, and kind of that professional training, and what did that bring to you? What did that give to you?
When I was here, the director of the youth theatre also ran the Birmingham Rep, and that was Derek Nichols. And at the Birmingham Rep, Derek had started a new programme called the Young Company. And Alex Kingston was in the Young Company, Ian Glenn was in the Young Company, which was a lot of people. But what he used to do was he would go to London, he would audition young actors from all of the major drama schools in London, just in London, so in London. And he would invite the ones he thought were best to come and be part of the Young Company at the Rep, and that meant that they were a Rep company. They played old, young, and they would rehearse and play for a year, doing all sorts of plays, Shakespeare's and Chekhov and the musical and the Christmas show, and he was working them as actors, the old Rep system. And I spoke to him, and I went to see all of those shows because he ran the theatre. I could get him free, as long as I told him what night I was coming, and I could get him free because I watched actors who just left drama school. And for me, at that time, the best actors that I saw were from Guildhall, and they were from Central, and they were from RADA. And so I thought, right, that's what I've got to go for. To be honest, my dancing at that level had a lot of potential, but it wasn't classical trained, it was okay. My singing again was strong, but no classical training. And my acting was great, but it was youth theatre and I didn't know anything about the classics. And in taking a look around our industry, I realised that the people who really change the way you see any of those arts are people that regularly dive in and out of the classics. Classical forms of dance, classical singing and acting. So at dancing, I thought, well, my career would be over by the time I'm 40, or I'd be doing something else with it. Not so true now, but then I thought that. With the singing, for me it would be opera, and I could have gone down that route, but I realised I'd be preparing for a role 2 years in advance. Your timetable's booked out like 4 years in advance or something. I looked at acting and went, ooh, you can do stuff when you're supposed to be retired. And so I decided that I would learn. I had to learn to handle classical texts, classical forms of expression as an actor, and then my singing and my dancing would supplement that. And so I aimed at acting.
Brilliant. And then you say you sort of leave RADA and you become a man who gets paid to be somebody else, which is rather joyous. I mean, how did you then sort of, say you leave RADA, you graduate, how do you then end up in the West End?
A lot of people at drama schools think, oh, when I leave drama school and enter the profession, I'll do this and I'll do that and do that. And I keep saying, you're already in the profession. If you're studying at a drama school, you're in it. Don't wait till you leave to suddenly adopt some work practice or some discipline or some ethic or code of practice. You're in it. Because when I was at drama school, the teacher that taught me text study, she was my director on my first job, second job when I left. When I did a showcase, one of the plays at drama school at RADA, a director who came to see me invited me up to go to Edinburgh to do a show in the Edinburgh Festival. So I was in that enviable position of leaving, not having left drama school yet, having my first 2 jobs lined up, and I had an agent before I'd left. Once that happened, the next job came along, and it was Albie James asked me to audition to play Corey in a play called Fences, August Wilson Fences. Raphael Koto was playing Troy Maxon, the lead, and it was Liverpool Everyman, it was Bill Kenwright, and it was going to be in the West End as well. And so I auditioned for Albie. But to all of those practitioners out there, part of your auditions happen when you're performing in somebody else's piece and someone comes to see you. That's how you've auditioned already for loads of people that you have never met while you're carrying out somebody else's piece. And so if you're in something and you hate doing it, you don't like it, you're not going to try that night, okay, fine. But the other people who were about to audition you were already out there. And that's what happened with Albie. He saw me in something and asked me to come along. And that ended up, that was the British premiere of that play. It ended up going to the West End, so that was my first job in the West End.
Fantastic, fantastic. And then shifting gears slightly, so suddenly Hustle happens. And Hustle, I've watched the whole box set over the past 2 days. And it's a joyous tone. It's absolutely fantastic.
Great.
I mean, for people who haven't seen it, I suppose I'd describe it as the famous 5-go conning, basically. And it's just a wonderful thing. And I think that must have been wonderful to be in, because each time you're pretending to be somebody else to scam somebody else. And you're always scanning the bad guys.
Yeah.
And that was just, I think it's so funny and sassy and a delightful confection. That's great.
Yeah, that was nice. And Tony Jordan, who created the series, is a very, very clever man. And we even have some people who were in as extras in the show. Yes, out there. Tony, he's really clever. The tricks and the cons. There are only 3 basic cons, and we managed to get 48 episodes out of it. Because Tony knew what he was doing. Incidentally, as you say, the famous 5 goes conning, I'm wondering which one of us was the dog. But it was, because of everything I said before, I get kind of restless easily. I couldn't be stuck playing one character for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. I feel that's going to clip my wings a little bit. I get kind of, I want to do this, and I want to go and sing in the musical, I kind of do that. I have that tendency. But the reason why I stayed with Hustle for so long is because the team behind it were brilliant. Kudos and directors and producers, everybody was fantastic. But and the crew, the other actors. But it was because of that chocolate box thing. Every time I opened the script to say, what are we doing this week? I didn't know whether I was going to be British or American or African, or I didn't know what character I was going to be, what accents was going to be used, what tricks I was going to have to learn, or whether I was going to be running naked through any basic parts of the movie.
I have to say it's particularly joyous. That's just wonderful.
Yeah, that's fun. It's an episode where I had to con someone by pretending to be a hip-hop producer from America. We had fun.
That's great. And it's also really interesting kind of bit it goes through the series, It's really interesting. It kind of starts out, and you see the production values. I think it goes from a 12 to a 15. You suddenly see it all, and then literally when you put the DVD in, it's wonderful because it's then clearly gone. It's been such a hit. It's now in about 27 different languages, and you have to go through until you find out which one find the UK part. And while you were doing that, you decided that you'd like to be the other side of the screen for a while, maybe?
Yeah.
How was that?
It was great. It was great. I had this sudden feeling of power. I directed an episode of Hustle, which I've been talking about to the producers for a while. And I learned a little thing about business during that. I kind of said, oh, it would be nice if I could do this. I really want to, and I think I could handle it, and so on. And understandably, I think everyone behind the camera kind of went, oh, we're not sure, we don't know. It's done in America all the time, but it wasn't quite done here. And so I just had to push and keep insisting and saying, I really want to do this, and I can, and so on and so on. And in the end, they said, yeah, okay. So the beginning of the last season, the first 2 episodes, they're shot at the same time. But Ulrich Riley directed episode 1, and I directed episode 2. And we would share time on set, and I'd be in his episode and then jump behind the camera to direct my episode. And I loved it, thinking in pictures and balancing shots. And anybody heard of the Golden Triangle in art? No? Move on. Oh, it's one at the back. Okay, so it's that balancing a picture, balancing a good photograph, has to take a good photograph, but doing that with movement, making the shapes move and shift, and where your focus goes and so on. And so it just, as you can hear, I loved it, and I had a great time doing it. And since then, I've gone on to do some other stuff, and I'm working on doing some more.
But didn't I hear a little rumour that you were, while directing, you were actually having to direct yourself and the boot of a car? Does that kind of, yes, maybe? I've done my research.
Yeah, I did. Tony cleverly wrote an episode where Nikki had been kidnapped, my character had been kidnapped, and locked in the boot of a car, and would only be released on the return of something very valuable. So I had to shoot myself with the team doing the bit before I was kidnapped, and then shoot myself in the boot of a car, being kidnapped, and then shoot the bit where I was freed again in the big rumble that happened at the end. And I remember I set the cameras up, got everybody doing their thing, and then I had my hands tied behind my back and a blindfold put around my eyes, and then I shouted action, if you can do it. So I went, action, and the whole mask was put on my head. And then I was put through this scene, and everything went well, they said, and I was shoved into the boot of the car, and they slammed the car. That was the end of the scene. And they slammed the car, and I waited. And the director shouts, cut. Because sometimes the director, after shouting action, sees things happening with the actors after they've finished speaking, and he thinks, oh, that is wonderful, let's keep that. And I don't know why I went into that accent, but that's what they do. And then they wait and wait and wait, and then they shout, cut. So they put me in the car and slammed the boot, and I waited. And then I sort of pushed the gag off my mouth, because my hands were tied behind my back. And I shouted, cut! And no one heard, and I shouted, cut! And I banged on the roof with my elbow, and I could hear laughing. And then the first shouted, cut. So actually, the idea of being able to say, legitimately being able to say, I directed it on my house, I don't know. I've said it now, it's going to follow me. But yeah, it was tricky at times, but I really enjoyed it. And then when I did Riviera, which is I think I did for Sky Atlantic in Nice, I wasn't kidnapped, but I had to direct myself a lot more while doing 250 extras and some pyrotechnics and things. It was a real step up, and I really enjoyed that. It's like I'm addicted to it. I want to do more.
You want to do more? You're going to do more?
I'm going to do more.
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, so leaving Mickey Bricks behind, so suddenly the NT calls, and you're at the National Theatre and Othello. I mean, that just must have been an extraordinary experience. Absolutely incredible reviews. I mean, just what was that like being on that stage?
It's a big stage. The first play I'd done on that stage was Henry V for Nick Heitner. So when Nick arrived at the National Theatre, his opening production as director, he said, "Do you want to play Henry V?" And I went, "Yeah." And there is not a day that goes by, and I hope it never stops happening, where if I get a good job, I feel like that kid who's just walked out of a dance studio here, who goes, "Yes!" That worked, that session that I just did work. I have that feeling inside that, oh, okay, right, and I'm into the next problem, right, how am I going to do it, where are we setting it, and so on. And with Othello, I mean, it was on the National Theatre, the Olivier stage, it's big. The emotions that Othello goes through, big. Having played Red Velvet beforehand and playing Ira Aldridge beforehand, my perspective on Othello and its history had been informed a lot more than if I hadn't played Ira Aldridge. And we decided to come at the play in a modern way. Nick believes that all of Shakespeare's plays are written about the people then today, so he feels the plays are about today, and he feels that because we all feel that because it has so much about human nature within it, you can explore them from any time frame as long as you have humans, the plays will connect. Othello is a difficult play. It's an ugly play. Personally, I don't like it. I think it's brilliant, but I don't like it. If I go to see Othello and it's brilliantly done, and the character playing Othello really takes you through that journey, I come away angry and hate it. Because it gives rise to so many, it's like a tragedy, it upsets you. And if I go to see Othello and it's not very well done, and it's a terrible acting, terrible directing, then I'm angry for all sorts of different reasons. It was difficult, and both Henry V and Othello have this big sort of canopy over them at the National Theatre, and it was the Olivier canopy. How did Olivier have done it and what did Olivier do? And I firmly, with both of those plays, absolutely went round that. And for me, they worked brilliantly at the time, but I don't feel that that version of Othello says really anything about who we are today. And I hope in our production we touched the nerve that Shakespeare was working. It's no coincidence really that the play of Othello used to be played in America when theatre was completely segregated. Black companies would play the tragedy of Othello to black audiences. And in their hands, that play says something completely, very different. Something incredibly powerful. So when Ira was involved with Brown's Theatre, James Hewlett, if he was playing Othello, they would use makeup and everything for the white characters, a bunch of black actors on stage, but it said something different. And for the most ignorant people, in either audience, a white audience or a black audience, for the most ignorant and narrow-minded people, the play in one hand says, look what they do to us. If you're at Brown's Theatre, if you're in that black audience, black actors setting. And on the other hand, the play says, and people have written this down, the play says, well, look what they will do if we allow them to marry into our societies and come over here and take our jobs and all of that. And there is a racist line running through both responses, and Shakespeare is working that on purpose. And it's very, very clever, and it makes a lot of audience members and some people playing the part very uncomfortable, but it's something that's being done on purpose, and he pushes Iago, who's probably the most evil creation he's ever created, front and centre, as your eyes through which you are going to see every character. And he forces that on you. And he makes him smiling, friendly, colloquial, easygoing. And it's quite a clever, uncomfortable device. I think that's it.
I think you said that you're on record as saying that like the first 20 minutes is terrific. It's just a joy, and then the rest of it is absolute torture and exhausting, and every muscle in your body is working.
Yeah, every muscle,
I mean,
intellectual
where do you
muscles as well.
start? Where do you start? You kind of get the email. Okay, you're playing Othello. Where do you start to find that character? What's your process?
Normally in a little club, a little board, thinking, if I could do this. Where do you start? Backstory, look at history. It's a modern production. So in a modern production, Othello says he's been fighting since he was 7 years old. Right, where in the world have people, children, been fighting since they were 7 years old? What are the effects of that? So I just looked at that properly and rebuilt him from the ground up. And the belief in Iago. We had an advisor, General Jonathan Shaw, came in to advise us, and he did, his military record is long and very well decorated, and he and his trusted sergeant major, they both came, very nice, spoken guy. And we thought, oh my God, you've worked out how to kill people. And they know their stuff, and they sat and they watched through of the play after we've been working with them on drill and the insignias and how to wear your beret, where you wear your gun, and how to put your webbing on and all that. And they came and watched the run through the play, and I remember looking over at the end, and they were both in tears. And for them, the real betrayal was Iago to Othello. They tried to make us understand that the character of the soldier is one, and the strength of the soldier exists because of the person next to you. That's how you get through any kind of skirmish or any kind of campaign. You're not fighting for yourself, you're fighting so the person next to you stays alive. And the person next to you is fighting so the person next to them stays alive. So everybody has to do their job. And they have to do it selflessly. Whether you hurt, whether you're tired, whether you're upset, whether you're scared, you do your job. Because if you don't, you compromise the safety of the person next to you. Because that's who you're there to look after and make sure it gets home as well. And what they saw on stage was they saw a character stand front and centre and say, I'm not going to do that. And he was wearing a uniform. And for both of them, they came out in hives. They kind of just went, that is really terrifying to have someone pretend like that and actually, because what they know of war is very different to what I think I might have read about war. So that was very interesting, and they completely understood why Othello went on that journey. For me, I had stumbling blocks all the way through the play, but they both sat down and went, completely get it. Jonathan even made a comment, a very light comment, so I won't quote him directly, but he made a very light comment about people who had their lives threatened while in uniform, had worked alongside each other, and worked in a team. And every member of that team is basically saying that I would risk my life for you. That's how they all survive. They've got to agree. No matter what the language used, what camaraderie, no matter how much they take the mick out of each other, the line is, I would risk my life for you. And then they go back into a society where no one really cares, not to that degree, not about the person you meet or your neighbour, not to that degree. And he said that he can sometimes understand why people just cannot fit in, cannot get back into a society that does seem, can seem on some levels, much, much colder than the place they've been trained in and the place they've come from. But I haven't quoted him directly. That's what I understood by what he meant.
And you talk about stumbling blocks, and there's quite interesting stumbling blocks in Shakespeare. I mean, clearly you still believe very passionately in Shakespeare and the language and those stories and the contemporary currency of those stories. A while ago you did a project working with some young people in Coventry, And I just thought that was such a brilliant thing to do. You and your wife Lolita went in and worked with young people and started working on Romeo and Juliet with them. How did you find it? Because I'm constantly with teaching, I'm fascinated with how whether you take Shakespeare to them or you bring them to Shakespeare. How do you approach that?
Take Shakespeare to them first. And the language is beautiful, the language is complex, the language is a construct. That's like a wheelwright, a craftsman with wheels. A playwright is a craftsperson with language. And when you read Shakespeare, you can see that the meaning has been squeezed, it's been reduced, it's been simmered and been reduced. And sometimes you can find 2 or 3 meanings in one line. A lot of the time, because of the old language, you have to search for what the words mean and so on and so forth. But whenever I've worked with young people on any Shakespeare play, once you give them context, the rest is easy. If you start off talking about beautiful language here, or you read it around the class and they have no idea who's saying what to whom and why, it just gets boring. But if you start off talking about context, then you get them. You get whoever they are, wherever they are, you get them. The Tempest, for instance, Prospero on a desert island and so on. You start off that session, you start off looking at that play by talking about survivalists, Bear Grylls, what you have to eat, what contains protein. Did you know that this flour, fennel, if you boil it, will give you this? Did you know you can treat wounds with this because that's antiseptic properties? You get kids talking about that, how you would survive. Imagine you were stranded with your kid and you left alone, had to fend for yourself. Imagine that. And what you would do, how you would build. You can watch survival programs. There's a program where a guy gets dropped somewhere in the world with nothing but a camera to watch him. He's amazing. And then he just survives. He breaks down palm trees and bamboo. He finds bamboo. He can recognize plants and so on. Start there, then go into what the Tempest, I'll keep going. Magic, tricks, card tricks, Harry Potter, wands, all of those things, the make-believe. The people who actually believe magic is real in the world. If you look at healing and alternate therapies, is that a form of magic or not? Or is it just about bloodlines and ley lines and so on? I'll stop going on. But basically, I do think that if you enter with context, and you can do that with Henry V, you can do that with Macbeth, you can do that with Riviera Theatre, you can do that with Othello, any play at all, start with the context before you, and then introduce character, and then introduce language. And I think you will hook people. And we have to do that because our arts really are, our artists take care of our culture. Artists, no culture. For anything. What the clothes you're wearing, your shoes, who came up with the design, who came up with making them look the way they do, the jackets you have, the music you might listen to on the way home. Artists, 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 and if they're British made, British born and have a British sound, then it's part of British culture. If you don't take care of it, you lose it, and you start adopting that culture from somewhere else. And that's why I think it's important to pass those things on. So if our young people do not have open access to all of those pillars of culture, dance, art, visual arts, pottery, you name it, singing, music, if they don't have open access to that, then you only have to wait a generation before that particular art form starts to die. Anyway, I digress,
No,
but context I think is the thing.
Okay, so jumping off context, you then received major critical acclaim for Red Velvet, and that was just an absolutely fantastic piece of theatre.
Oh,
I mean, how Lolita, you wrote, so your wife created that play, wrote that play, that must have been a really interesting thing to work together and create such an important play.
Yeah, I mean, she did all the work. Sorry, that was my fault. She did all the work, but don't tell her I told you that. I had done a reading about Ira Aldridge, and I came home going, have you heard of this guy? I've never heard of this guy. How come we never heard of this guy, Ira Aldridge? One of the best actors of his generation. And she started reading and doing a bit of digging, and then she came back and said, I think there's a story here, I think there's a film. And she started working on the film, she started researching even more. And it was amazing, the stuff that she found out. And she showed the film to a friend, and the friend said, I think it's a play. So she started writing a play. And she worked on that on her own. She couldn't get anyone to put it on for about 7 years. So for 7 years, she was writing a story about a black actor from the 19th century that no one had heard of. And she just kept going. She didn't give up. And now and again, she looks at her awards and is glad she didn't give up. But it was a fascinating journey. I remember she'd be up there for hours in the office just writing. And she taught herself to write, so she just did it. And then as an actress who studied text, she thought she could, so she just went for it. And I would just knock on the door and put my head round, think she should eat at some point. I put my head round, and she'd be there, frozen over the computer with tears. And she'd go, yeah. And I'd say, do you want a cup of tea or some food? And she'd go, yeah, 10 minutes. And she'd go back to the screen. And she had to kind of act her way through every role to make sure it made sense. So she would write it, and she'd switch off as the writer and then act it. And if it wasn't good enough, she'd keep acting and think about what was missing, and then the writer would come out and write it in. You know, she'd work in that way, which is a bit brilliant. Again, not that I told you that. So yeah, she did all the work. But to work on it together, to be in the rehearsal room, playing Ira with a really good friend of ours directing it, Adrian Lester, and then the meetings behind the desk as the sort of historical advisor. It was one of the best rehearsal experiences I've had. It was really, really good. It was a labour of love for us, and we're really happy that it got legs and it was well received.
Yeah, completely wonderful. Okay, so going back to your roots and kind of, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about the film you were involved with about the Windrush.
Yeah.
And just what your role in with that, what your role was within that, and how that.
Empire's Children looked at, I think, 6 Britons in the public eye and traced their history across the waters to some parts of the empire, India, Jamaica. Mine was Jamaica, just in case you wondered. It's like a private joke, a couple of people laugh. But it was a journey of discovery for me. I remember the cameras coming into our house, didn't they, Mum? And they interviewed you, and they interviewed my mum and my aunt. So my mum and her younger sister and her younger brother sat with a family friend and aunt who was older than all of them, and they just chatted about arriving in England in 1960. Grandpa came over in 54, didn't he? My grandfather, my mum's dad. When was it? 53. 52. 52. You can't get things wrong when your mum's here. 52. And so I had heard, but began to learn about the history behind my family, and with that, you learn about a section, a part of British history. And it was fascinating. It was fascinating because the strength of people in all these stories. These people have been disenfranchised, and it's not just black people. I mean, I'm talking about Irish people, I'm talking about Indian, I'm talking about, all over the world, people have had means and opportunity removed from them and found a way. And when I was looking at how people had found a way connected to my family, my particular family, it's inspiring. It really is inspiring. It was wonderful to see, to do that. I didn't do the research as well. There were things I didn't know. I just went along and they'd give me a sheet and said, we're doing this today. And I'd get off the bus, the journey they made in Jamaica, and they go, by the way, this is commonly called Lester Hill. And it's called Lester Hill because about 5 generations of your family were born and raised here. And then they would film me as I went, what? Because they wanted the money shot. My grandfather was supposed to be in Empire's Children. And we would for about 2 weeks we turned up each day to see if he had the strength to film, and he didn't, and he was in hospital. And they wouldn't allow the cameras into the hospital because a program had just been released on British television called Jamaica A&E or Jamaica 999 or something, and it was pretty disparaging about the treatment of patients in this Jamaican hospital. And I think that was probably the idea, a shock piece. And so all the nurses went, no cameras. And so I'd go and visit my granddad, and I'd talk to him about the things that he wanted to say if he ever got on camera. The stuff he wanted to say about growing up, the stuff he wanted to say about his children, and how proud he was, and of their children, and how the things that the decisions he made when he was a young man, and the path he grew to walk, he didn't just walk for him, it had an effect on his offspring, and then on their offspring, and there I was coming back to ask him about it. So he didn't get the chance. We couldn't have him on camera, and we always window at the end of the program so that while they were editing, so that they could call me and fly me out to Jamaica to do that interview with him. But instead, I was out of the country and we got the news that he died before we had a chance to take part in this program that was basically celebrating the results of his journey and my grandmother's journey. And so the little piece of camera about, although his presence isn't physical in that piece, his presence is all over it. So yeah, that was a real journey discovery for me.
And just how incredibly proud he must be of you and of all of your achievements.
I think so. I think that with all of us, the family is spread far and wide. And only by asking my mum where. Only by asking my mum do I get where everyone has gone, and how far the family has spread out to America and all over this country, and still in Jamaica and so on.
And so, before I throw it open to the audience, so now is your warning, start thinking of your questions. What's next for you? What's next in terms of telly? You've got is it Trauma that's coming out, Mike Bartlett?
Yeah, I just finished filming a thing for ITV called Trauma. It's a 3-parter. Great fun doing it. It's a really good script. Mike Bartlett wrote it. He wrote Dr. Foster and Charles II. It's a thriller. John Sim and I go head to head. I got to stretch my muscles a bit, and I really enjoyed it. And I just did the ADR for it. ADR is additional dialogue recording. So sometimes if you're on the screen and you're speaking and you're saying something really meaningful and powerful, and that happens, and you carry on, they'll get you into the ADR suite and get you to revoice yourself as you're going along. So that they put the revoicing on top of the program as it goes out. It destroys the magic. Some people don't want to hear it because it destroys the magic. But that's weird. It's always a weird experience because in my head, when I speak and I hear my voice resonating in my head, I sound like Barry White. Yeah, Barry White after a few rum and cokes. That's what I sound like in my head. And then I stand in a booth and I see myself acting on screen, and I hear the voice that comes back at me I play the speakers a lot as well, and I hear the voice that comes back at me, and it sounds a bit like this. But I think we should no, that's very serious. Let's go this way. And I sort of think, who is that? So I try to revoice myself, and whenever I revoice myself and I say, Adrian, the line that you said, it's 4 o'clock, we have to leave now, can you revoice that? And I go, yeah. And they go, and go, and they go, it's 4 o'clock. Because I want to compensate for the lack of Barry Whiteness in the ADR. At which point they go, okay, you go again, but this time, you sound like a frustrated orange. Yeah, anyway, so yeah, that's done. Please watch, it is good. I saw that really well. At least it's not going out live anywhere, so no one's going to watch it. But yeah, we're very, very proud of Trauma. It's a really good piece. And I also did just finished Mary Queen of Scots, a feature film. Josie Rourke's first film. She is the AD at the Donmar Warehouse, and this is her first feature. So it's Mary Queen of Scots, Elizabeth I and Queen Mary, and their relationship, or lack of a relationship. And so that comes out in October. And right now, I'm sitting in places talking about myself a lot.
Well, let's continue that by letting some other people ask some questions. So, are there any questions out there? It would be useful to be able to see people as well, because at the moment all I can see is white light. Oh, hello, everybody.
Hello.
Is there a hand?
Yes, I'm in the black t-shirt with the hand up.
Given you've exercised your muscles and your legs free, I'm looking forward to you appearing on the list next to Idris for Bond. But curious as to what role you'd love to play. Sorry, I thought I was projecting. Curious as to what role, if you had the opportunity yourself, you would put yourself in.
What role I put myself in? I'm always itching to do more film work. What role I don't know. There are two scripts. One script my wife wrote, one I wrote. And we're trying to get funding for them, so we'd love to get those done. As for being next to Idris in Bond, I could be a Betty. I'd have to get a very white voice out there. That comes and goes in waves. You know, that comes and goes, and names are mentioned and then they're put away, and names come up and they're put away. And it's a nice dance, and it's led by the papers. It's nothing official ever comes out from the Broccolis or MGM or studios, nothing official. It's always led by papers going, who would you like? And then there's a Twitter follow and so on. And that's all nice, and it's a massive compliment. And so I just let that be and keep the door open for what maybe I can have more control over.
Exciting. Are we allowed to ask what you've written about, or is that under wraps? Okay, that's under wraps. I've written a film called Lottery Boy, and it's taken from the book by Michael Byrne of the same name. We are in the process of getting the money together and the package together, and we've just started working with the producer, which is great news. The other script my wife has written is called For Joy, and it's about 4 characters, and it takes place in present day and also takes place 15 years ago. It's a very complex, complicated, emotional story, and it's one that I would give my right arm to have the chance to direct. So there's those 2. Brilliant. Thank you. Any other questions?
Hi. You've obviously been on an amazing journey. I was just wondering what you'd say to that young kid who's got his skateboard, thinking about coming through the doors of the Mac now, that boy or that girl, thinking about going through that gateway. What can the Mac give them, and what would you say to them now, looking back?
If it was me, go and do your homework. I wouldn't say anything. I think I made a decision. I didn't know I'd made the decision. I made a decision when I was young that I didn't get fed at school. School didn't really teach me what I wanted to know. I really wanted to know more about me and that stuff. School wasn't interested then. The education has changed now. And the stuff I could do, I thought, let me do more of what I can do. Let's do some drumming, let's do some singing, let's do some. School wasn't interested. So I was quite happy to turn my back on that. I made that decision. I kind of have an attitude of working on all my weaknesses. And so whenever I see myself performing something, I just see a catalogue of weaknesses. I see a catalogue of things I didn't get right. And I'm constantly thinking, next time I'll work on those and make those better. I suppose in many ways, the fact that people look at me like a classical actor is because when I left drama school, I hadn't done a Shakespeare play. And the language was still a problem for me, and I knew it was a weakness. And so I went, right, every job you get that allows you to work on that weakness, you must go for it. And it's really ironic that I can sit here and be regarded by some people as a sort of classical actor. So yeah, that's what I would say. Oh, and to the other people who are not me, about to come into the doors of this place to access the food, I'd say keep coming and stay as long as you like.
My question is about the Othello, which I was privileged enough to see at the National, and I just want to say it touched every single one of my nerves, and everything that you've said about it when you were speaking about it really, really came across in that production. One thing that really struck me about it initially is that it was absolutely palpable, that degree and intensity of that relationship and trust between Othello and Iago. So it set me to think. I don't know how well you knew Rory Kinnear or how much you'd worked with him beforehand. Is it a help or a hindrance when you approach a stage production like that, if you know the people that you're acting with?
I think it's always a help. I didn't really know Rory before then, and so we met, we had dinner, we talked about the roles we were playing. We had Jonathan there as well, Jonathan Shaw, to advise us militarily about stuff. But the jealousy is like a little green pill, and Iago has it first. Iago swallowed it before the play starts. He is consumed by it, and very slowly he gives the pill to Rodrigo. Rodrigo has a bit, and then he gives the bit to Brabantio. And he uses whatever he can to get people to see the world as he sees it. And when he has them on side, then he uses them. And then it takes him a long time to give the pill to Othello. But once he gives the pill to Othello, Iago's been driving the play. As soon as he does that, Iago can then step back and Othello can drive the play. So Iago drives the play with sort of an intellectual power for the first hour. And then when Othello takes over, he drives the play with this raw emotional power for the rest of the evening. A lot of is made. I know you didn't ask this, but I was going to say it on the side. A lot is made about race in Othello, quite rightly so. But there is the fact that there are two wives who end up murdered by their husbands just for trying to say the truth. Just for trying to tell their husbands the truth, they end up murdered on the bed at the end of the play. And I always just keep in the back of my mind that we spend much less time talking about that than we do about the other stuff. And I know your question wasn't that, but I'm just saying that as an aside. During the Act 3, Scene 3, which is called the Temptation Scene, where Iago talks Othello into being jealous, Rory and I worked out every look and every pause, and we rehearsed so that I knew where he was looking at me, and he knew when I was about to look at him so that he could look away. And then we let the gaps, we let the pauses stay there. It was choreographed almost, where I moved, where he moved, and then we would improvise the rest. I mean, physically. And then we trusted each other implicitly. It was really good working with him. Physically, he was brilliant. There was one point where he punched me on stage. And there was another point where I punched him on stage. By mistake, in a different performance. I had to grab him, and he moved the wrong way, and as I went to grab him, I went, and he just looked at me and went, and when he came off, he said, I'm going a bit method, are we? And then one night, I grabbed him, and we were doing the thing, and then he had to kind of feel, and he grabbed me, and I must have looked the wrong way, and he punched me, and it was a different show completely. I just looked at him and went, and he came off and went, I'm so sorry. Yeah, it was good working with someone of that skill level that you can trust so well. And actually, Desdemona, Olivier Theatre, we worked out a very complicated system of how to do the death scene with Othello killing her. And when it came to trust, she was brave and brilliant. And she really let herself be. It was quite a tricky scene, and if I got it wrong, it was dangerous for her. And she just absolutely trusted, and we had everything timed and worked out to a T, and she was fantastic.
Thank you. Best Othello I've ever seen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's Emery's.
Sir, I thought I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you a question tonight. You've been quite long with me. But aside from all of this, from me to you now,
Yeah.
I genuinely want to know how the hell a little lad from West End turned into such a megastar. Because I think I've done okay myself. Jesus! What's going on?
I owe you a drink.
Just ask me.
No, how can you? I would make it start. It's great to be here, and I haven't seen this building since I was coming in here with my speakers and my hat and my. Used to have the beer towel. You fold it in half so you could put it, you could sit on it. And I used to come in here in the back pocket. You stick it in the back pocket. I used to come in here with that as well and do the work here. I don't know. It just worked, and I know a lot of people will put one foot in front of the other and they'll chase their dream and they'll go, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to go for it and so on. But as much hard work as I put in, I seem to have luck come back at me or opportunity. And when the opportunity came back, I grabbed it. And it just worked. I have faultingly managed to say no to the right things to leave the other things to come in. So I'm really happy and lucky.
I should have said actually the right way. I actually realised who you were only after you met my dad in my story. Then I looked back on Hustle and I thought, Jesus, I remember him. I had the face, and I remember your friend as well.
Oh, right.
And the incidents with Kelly.
Patrick. Oh, yeah. That's all for later. Emrys came to our school from another school. And when he joined our school, he joined the ranks of what he became 6 black kids in the whole school. And it was the 80s and it was Birmingham, and what we would be shocked at now happened every day there. And it was that's just how things were. But I remember Emrys in the playground not taking it. Just not. And I remember him, you came in 3rd year, I think, or 2nd year. 2nd year. I remember him in 2nd year, he'd been in the school for 2 weeks. And I remember him standing in front of a kid who was a foot taller than him. And I won't go into detail, but about 5 minutes later, that kid regretted what he said. And he was I think it was a 4th year. We said 4th year then, so Emrys was year 8, the kid must have been year 10, maybe 11. And the kid regretted what he said. But it was an eye-opener, because in our school at that time, he didn't see that. That man there.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, one right down.
Good evening, and thank you for
Hello.
this is brilliant. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about your experience on working with Hamlet, particularly with Peter Brook as director.
There's so much to say. I've never seen a theatre director throw out so many good ideas. We had brilliant ideas, and Peter just quietly went, no. We had ideas in the rehearsal room and we did them, and we all thought, wow, that's going to be visually stunning, and so on and so on. And Peter would go, no, that's opera. Or he would say, no, that's something else. And he was always after distilling and getting to the heart of what the play was about. He took out the Fortinbras sections. He only dealt with the Hamlet and Mom and Dad and the ghost and the fallout from those relationships. And the play ran 2.5 hours straight through. He moved To Be or Not to Be, put it in a different place. And I was on stage for 2.5 hours, straight through, no interval. It was a real experience, and he taught me so much about acting. Some directors will tell you where to move. They'll say, stand up, and you say that line, move over there, sit down there, do all of that. And so you're thinking physically about the lines as you go through. I'm going to be really quick with this, because this is real sort of actor speak, but other directors will tell you where not to move. Don't sit down there. I don't think you should move over there. So the option of where to move is left open to you. Then you have better directors who tell you what to think. They'll say, I think you're thinking about this, and the memory is this, and they are great directors. And so you're led by the thought processes that you've agreed on, which is fantastic. Peter spent his time telling you what not to think. All the time. He didn't tell you what it was, he told you what it wasn't. And so, inadvertently, you kept going to deeper and deeper parts of yourself to find more and more truth that was your own. And the further I went, and there were sometimes I did a performance and I thought, I can't do it again, sometimes. But the deeper I got, the closer I got, I think, to what Hamlet was about, and the better I understood Shakespeare, and that particular genius. And the man who, with his writing, he plays with the idea of seeming, people pretending to be one thing, all the way through his plays. There are people who pretend to be something that they're not, either for themselves or for someone else. And those big soliloquies that are really famous, those big ones, you can see a character at the top start, and talking to themselves or to the audience, you can see them start at the beginning, having one idea of who they are or what they should do or what they should be. And by the end of the soliloquy, it's changed. So it's not simply there to tell the audience, I'm going to do this now. And I do this because the trees are blue and blue, and all that, trees aren't blue. But they don't do it because of that. You see them discover, have the mask, their own mask, like they're looking in the mirror. You see the mask slip, and they see something behind it. And you see them talk their way into that, pulling the mask off and acknowledging what's there. And then trying to put the mask back on before they encounter other characters on stage. And that's what is brilliant. And that's why I will make so much fuss about Shakespeare, because I haven't found another writer who does that so consistently. And when you do that, it doesn't matter if you're male, female, what race you are, what age you are, and what your weight is. When you're dealing with a writer that only looks at the essence of what it is to be human. Shakespeare doesn't write about kings, he writes about the humanity inside the king, the fallibility, the gullibility, and the vulnerability inside the king. He doesn't write, isn't Shakespeare a great writer of parts for peasants? No, he writes about the human inside that circumstance and unbreaks and remakes what that person is. And that's why I think he's fantastic. And it was with Peter that we really got to the hub of that and got to really explore that. Mark?
I just wanted to ask you about whether, or your views on the BBC casting a female in what was probably a male role for Doctor Who, whether that is a big step change in diversity for the future of UK TV.
Did everybody hear that question?
Mark was asking about the casting of a female in the role of Doctor Who, and whether that was a big step forward in diversity for TV. There is a strange thing that happens with arts in this country, and we believe that ground zero is is heterosexual and male and white. And it's because most of what we listen to and watch has been previously or is now constructed through that eye. It isn't, and if we can think of what the world looks like, you can see that point is actually over there to the right or over there to the left. It is not the doorway through which everything is balanced. So through that doorway, ethnicity is other. It's not actually that the rest of the world is like that, and that lives and breathes among us, and we should encounter it all the time. So we get caught up in language that solidifies how we frame the conversation. And the conversation is always framed from the point of view that this is normal and sincere and ground point one, and whatever else happens is different, and we should give it a chance, and it should happen, and so on and so forth. Can you see what I'm saying? You kind of denigrate in order to include. There's that idea that happens, especially as we talk about diversity and so on. It's something that must be allowed because, and actually, that's just the truth. It's just the truth. it should happen. I love the fact that Doctor Who is female. I love the fact that after 13 incarnations, 12 incarnations, something different has happened, and she'll breathe new life into it. She's a fantastic actress, and Chris is a fantastic writer, and Chris Chibnall is now running the show. And I wait to see what will happen. And I think that we will continually move in popular television, in film and in theatre, we'll continually move down this path where we are encouraged again and again and again to see character before you see colour, and to see character before you see gender, and to see character before you see sexual persuasion, and to see character before you see level of income. And as long as we can keep doing that and keep making those changes, characters are much more complex and diverse than any skin tone or sexuality will be, much more. And I think that doorway is one that we have to encourage ourselves to walk through, but once we walk through it, it's going to be great.
Absolutely. So we'll probably take one more question.
I'll make a short answer, I promise.
Just following on from that, on diversity, a lot of black British actors, I think 10, 15 years ago, were going to America to work in film and television over there because it was so much more difficult to do that here. And I wondered if you felt that was improving and whether it's different between film and television and theatre.
I think, everyone heard the question? I think it's improving across the board. I think the kid that I was, that kid now, looking, watching television, going to the theatre, going to the cinema, they will see that they are included. They'll see that they can do those jobs because they're there. There are people that they can admire who are doing them, and they're British. And I think it's changing. It's changing for the better. It would be nice, because we've got our foot firmly on the pedal of the meetings and the diversity issues and the tables and the BBC license fee things and so on, all of those things. It would be nice to see that change happen and sustained when we take our foot off the gas and we don't have those meetings. At the moment, I don't think that would happen, but I look forward to the day. I look forward to the day when it will.
Okay, well, it's only left for me to say a massive thank you for being with us this evening. It's been a huge privilege and really inspiring, and wishing you many, many future successes, and hopefully see you back at MAC again. And just to say to everybody, there is a Windrush, Beyond Windrush season that's on next May. Just checking May, I'm saying right, yes, May to July 2018. It'd be amazing to see you all back there for that. But for now, I'd like to say a huge thank you to Adrian. So thank you.